So thank you for being here today. So how are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
I am doing great. A little bit nervous. You guys could probably tell. So have you always been interested in studying anthropology?
Not always. When I first started here at CRC, my major was undecided for, I want to say, about a year. And then it was thanks to one of my friends who I met in one of my art classes. She had nothing but good things to say about anthropology classes and how interesting the subject was and how great the professors were, that I was interested in taking it. And as the semester went on, I just kept hearing more and more about the anthropology classes. And I was like, I don't really know what that is. And when I asked people to explain it, they would just say, oh, it's the study of humans. I was like, okay, well, that's everything, right? In some way, that's everything. So I didn't really get a straight answer as to what anthropology was until I actually took my first anthropology class. Mm-hmm. And then I was like, pretty much sold.
Can you tell us about your experience, how it was like to transfer from a community college to a four-year university?
I want to say that it was definitely a little nerve-wracking. I'm a first-generation college student, so I didn't have, like my parents to guide me through the college admission process or tell me about how majors and minors worked or if I could double major. So all of that was really like a new experience to me that I had to kind of navigate on my own. And so I want to say the hard part really was not necessarily enrolling or the actual paperwork, but being on my own for the first time and navigating a new city all on my own and school all on my own. So really just going from Sacramento my whole life to 2 hours north was the biggest and hardest transition for me, I want to say.
What made you choose CSU Chico?
So initially, my plan was to go to UC Davis. I had all of the requirements and everything for them set up, and I had a tag agreement. I was pretty much on track to go to Davis. But once I got to the end of my coursework, I think at like the 2-year mark, I want to say, I felt like I wasn't quite ready. Like I still wasn't sure if anthropology was what I wanted to do and if Davis was where I wanted to pursue it, even though knowing then and knowing now that it's a very, very good school for anthropology, I don't know if I was ready to make that leap yet. So I waited an extra year, looked more into anthropology. I took a forensic anthropology course here, and then that kind of galvanized my feelings towards choosing anthropology. And so from there, I was like, okay, well, now that I know more specifically what it is that I want to do, and I know that I want to be more invested in forensics and the physical anthropology aspect, I know what to look for in schools that I'm applying to. And so from there, I looked into schools. I saw that Chico was close. I heard good things about Chico. A lot of my classmates were talking about going to Chico, so I looked into the program and I thought, academically and financially, this makes a lot of sense for me because I don't want to get a whole lot of debt in case I want to take this anthropology degree and apply it towards another field because it's so applicable. And so Chico has a lot of internships. They have a lot of physical and archaeology professors. So it was a really solid choice for what I wanted to do, and that's kind of what sold me towards going to Chico.
What are some of the differences between CSU Chico and CRC?
Oh man, there's a lot of differences. I'd say one of the biggest ones is probably just the campus culture. Here at CRC, I think we have a lot of people in the community because it's right like in the middle of Sacramento pretty much. So you get all kinds of people coming and taking classes. You have like elderly people who are just coming because they love the subject so much. You have younger people who don't really know what they're doing or they're just taking classes to raise their GPA. Whereas at Chico, a lot of the people there are, younger. They transferred to Chico from different states, from different cities. And so it's a lot more, I want to say there's more of a campus culture at Chico State, just because everyone's on their own for the first time and kind of finding like where they are. And then another aspect of that is the departments. Anthropology is such a small department, but because it's such a huge campus, there's definitely like a very solid anthropology group of people there too. So once you know one of them, chances are they've heard of you and you've heard of them at some point. So it's very much just a very close, small community.
Mm-hmm. Out of all of the subfields in anthropology, what made you become more interested in the forensic side?
Oh man, so that one was kind of like a bunch of stepping stones. I first took a physical anthropology class and I thought, okay, this is really cool. They look at a lot of different things, and the amount of information they're able to piece together from things like dental calculus and fossilized fecal remains is really interesting. And at the time, I didn't really piece together that forensics was a part of that. But as I took more classes, one of the things that I remember vividly when I think of when I chose to do physical anthropology was seeing a picture of a bog body. The case was that it was like somewhat of a forensic case, but also a bioarchaeology case because the person was, I want to say, like somewhere between 50 to 100 years old, fell into a bog, and then archaeologists recovered the body, and then they tried to piece together this individual's life using forensic methods, and found that it wasn't exactly a accidental trip into a bog. He was probably stabbed or murdered. And so I thought that was just absolutely fascinating. And so from there, I looked more into bioarchaeology. And then from bioarchaeology, I realized that forensic anthropology is the thing. And after working in forensic anthropology and through internships, I was exposed to a lot of other forensic specialties like medical examiners. So that kind of changed the game up for me a little bit, because now it wasn't, oh, I'm doing just forensic anthropology. It's, I'm also interested in the broader forensic aspect. And so that's kind of what steered my coursework towards where it is now.
Death to many people is a taboo, so how do you personally talk about it?
I think you kind of got to know your audience. I used to try and share a little bit of information about what I do with my family, and you kind of get mixed reactions. Like with my immediate family, they're like, ew, gross, you're not cooking dinner. But when I told my relatives, it was definitely like hot and cold. Some of them would be like, how does it feel working with dead bodies? Do you feel like you're going to be haunted? Or, oh, that's really cool. I don't really understand, but good for you for being in college. And you're not a doctor, but that's okay. It sounds like you're close enough. So it's definitely like you got to know your audience, and maybe just go over the very messy details and leave that out.
Did you ever have to distance yourself from any cases that you worked in? For a lot of the things that I did in the forensics lab, it wasn't particularly emotional for me, just because at that point I had been exposed enough to it to be able to kind of already emotionally distance myself by not constructing like this narrative for the individual in my head to make myself sad. like when you pass up like roadkill on the road, you know, you're like, oh no, that dog was wearing a sweater, probably ran out, you know. You just got to try not to invest yourself too much emotionally into what you're doing, because then it gets to that point where it does take that emotional toll on you. Especially with working in a hospital now, like you see a lot of very sad and tragic cases, and some of them become a little bit too relatable when, you know, the demographics of the patient match a lot of your close friends and family. But
I think for my own personal health, I had to just not think too much about that and just focus on what I was doing at the present moment. But there definitely have been a few cases where I was like, oh no, this person's like right around my sister's age and, you know, not a very good diagnosis. And so that's very, very much why I like encourage my sisters and my family to like just go to the doctor if you think anything's up. So that's kind of how I cope with that, I suppose.
How was the process of entering the workforce after receiving your bachelor's degree?
It was bumpy. It was bumpy for sure. After I graduated, I took a semester off where I wasn't working, I wasn't going to school. I just kind of wanted a chance to be done with school and, you know, go and travel and explore and kind of live my life before I started getting hit by all the commitments of adulthood. And so once I got back, it was a little bit more of a struggle to find a job because now I was already hurting for finding work. And it was the middle of summer, so that was good. There were a lot more options available. But a lot of places were not hiring at the time. And so given that, and plus I had taken such a long break from going to school and working, that I also felt like I had to explain in cover letters why I decided to take that break that I did. I eventually found a job working in a warehouse, and it was not really what I wanted to do, but it was kind of a job in the interim while I found something more up my alley. But from there, the pieces kind of fell into place just by, you know, looking at job postings and, you know, knowing what to search for and, you know, who to ask.
Why did you choose to work at Kaiser Permanente?
So I've always been going to Kaiser. I've always gotten really good care there as a patient. And, you know, my parents have always been very much about working in a hospital and, you know, if not being a doctor, then at least, you know, working at Kaiser and, you know, getting a good stable job with good benefits and all that. So they pushed me a lot to work in a hospital, especially Kaiser, and I just had nothing but positive experiences with them. So once I saw that they had a job posting available, I kind of hopped on it. I didn't think I would get it because it's a very like, I wouldn't say it's hard to get into the company, but a lot of people are applying for the jobs that they post just because it's very good reputation, good benefits, just all around great employer.
As a pathology technician, how different is it from working in forensic cases?
I almost want to say not at all. I mean, what you're actually doing is pretty much the same if you look at like the overall concepts. Working as a pathology technician requires a lot of attention to detail and making sure all of your I's are dotted, all of your T's are crossed. Because whether you're working with a legal case or a living patient, you want to make sure that they're getting the best patient care possible. And if there's any kind of negligence in how you treat either of those cases, it can go south and it can, you know, come back to haunt you and become a big mess pretty much. So really, a lot of the principles behind what you do in forensics and what you do working in a hospital are the same in the sense that you want to make sure you're doing your absolute best and not leaving anything undone or unchecked.
From your experience, what advice would you give to community students who want to follow in your footsteps?
Oh, man. I would say definitely do internships. Internships are probably what's going to set your resume apart from everyone else's. Anthropology is a great degree, but a lot of people choose to pursue an anthropology degree. And so when you're applying to jobs and there's people with anthropology degrees just like yours, and there's people with chemistry and biochemistry degrees, what's really going to set you apart is having internships under your belt that emphasize that you're wanting to do more than just the bare minimum. That, yeah, C's can get degrees, but they can't get you a good work ethic. So you definitely want to push yourself to find those internships and make sure that they're at least somewhat in the realm of what you're wanting to do in the future,
so that when an possible employer asks you, like, why should you have this job, you can pull up all of these experiences that you've had under your belt and say, you know, I've done this before. This shows that I'm willing to do more than just the bare minimum. And if you hire me, I'm not going to just do the bare minimum and become a liability to your company. I'm going to go above and beyond, and I've done this before. You know, I'm the best candidate for this position, and you should hire me. So,
Well, thank you for letting me interview you.
no problem. Thank you. So, like a lot of you guys, I didn't always know that I wanted to do anthropology, or even if I completed my degree, you know, what was I going to do afterwards? Forensics is a great career to pursue, but there's not always job postings for CSI investigators and all that. So you really have to know what you're looking for, and you have to make sure that you're casting a wide net and willing to take on different experiences, because what you think you want to do isn't always kind of what you actually want to do. And so what got me interested in going into healthcare was that a lot of that initial exposure to forensics showed me that, you know, I liked having that structure, but also that flexibility of, you know, playing a part in people's lives and being able to put my own work and my own work ethic into improving people's lives and helping the community and making sure that everyone's, you know, getting the rightful justice that they need and they're being taken care of. And so healthcare and forensics, like I was telling Adriana before, is that there's a lot of overlap. And so for me, I really enjoyed pursuing science and forensics, and healthcare was kind of like not really on the radar for me, other than my mom pestering me to become a doctor and an engineer and a lawyer, but it wasn't really on the radar. So when I initially took my first job working as a pathology assistant, it was kind of more of an iffy, like, I don't know what this job pertains to. But reading a lot of the job description fell into a lot of what I was doing working in the forensic anthropology lab over at Chico State. And so what I realized was that working in healthcare, there's a lot of necessity for the anthropological framework. You need to have an understanding of why people work the way they do, why they do the things they do, and get out of the mindset that people are unreasonable because they're unreasonable and they do things for no reason at all. And so in order to provide the best patient care possible, you really need to understand people, their background. How could a company serve a community that they have no understanding of? If you don't understand that a lot of culture, a lot of family values play into people's health history, how could you know how to best treat that? You know, so it wouldn't be a chronic issue. Like, speaking from like an Indian background, a lot of Indian cooking includes ghee, which is basically clarified butter. And Indian people also have high rates of cardiovascular issues, like heart attack. And so if your staff doesn't understand or isn't comprised of people who understand that this is what Indian culture is like and what Indian cooking is, then you wouldn't know to tell them, hey, maybe when you're cooking, cut back a bit on, you know, the butter, and instead of using that, use this, and that will prevent heart attack, or at least reduce your risk of it significantly moving forward. And so it's like that for a lot of cultures, and so that's why anthropology is so relevant to healthcare, is because we need to be able to understand why people are doing what they're doing, to be able to enlighten them of the risks and how they can fix that going forward. And so the other component of that too is that if people feel like they're culture isn't being understood or they're not being understood, they feel like they're not being listened to or heard by their doctor or their primary care physician, then they're going to have a negative experience going to your hospital, and they're not going to want to keep coming back to that hospital. They'll take their business and go somewhere else, which, you know, it's all within their right, but if a company can't keep its patients, then it can't continue to grow and get bigger and serve the larger community by providing more of their services. So it really cuts into their bottom line, like the amount of money that they make if their staff isn't well educated on why people are doing what they're doing and their cultures and their backgrounds. So a lot of what got me into healthcare was, or at least what kept me into healthcare, was that I was able to apply a lot of what I learned during my anthropology degree into it. So currently what I'm doing is essentially grossing specimens, which is dissecting them. I'll get more into that later. But what I was doing during my undergrad comprised a lot of attention to detail. I was doing physical anthropology, which does a lot of lifeway reconstruction, as well as archaeology, which has a lot of attention to detail. There's a lot of piecing together things based on context. You have to make sure all of your paperwork is set in order so that you can proceed without any issues legally or culturally as well. And so I was able to apply a lot of the concepts that I learned in archaeology and physical anthropology, as well as cultural anthropology, and to a lesser extent, linguistic anthropology. But they all kind of prepare you for working in healthcare in the sense that you start looking at the bigger picture. You're not just seeing like a appendix and you're thinking, okay, this is what it is, I'm just gonna submit this and move on with my life. It allows you to think, look at it and say, hey, this looks a little bit suspicious. Is it possible that in the body it's being affected by these other organs, and maybe I should ask the pathologist to further look into this to make sure that I'm proceeding in the best way to make sure that this patient's getting the best diagnosis possible and that they're getting the best patient care possible. And then the other part that played a very big impact on where I am now is internships. So I can't stress the importance of internships enough to you guys, because for me, they played such a pivotal role in what I was doing and what opportunities I had moving forward. So what initially sold me on going to Chico State was the Human Identification Lab. I heard that it was a really good internship to have. It was very lucrative, and it would set you up for success in physical anthropology going forward. And so I transferred to Chico State with kind of the pipe dream of getting in, and I was fortunate enough to actually get in and be able to participate in forensic recoveries and legal cases. And so that was kind of a jumping off point for me, because now I was getting exposure to what the field was actually like. I got to work with law enforcement investigators. I got to work with my classmates and my professors working on crime scenes. And so making mistakes wasn't exactly an option. You know, you had to really know your stuff going in and be confident about what you were doing while you were there. And then after the fact, make sure that you're capable of going over your work and making sure you didn't leave anything undone. And so a lot of those principles fall into what I'm doing now. But going from that internship, I also was able to turn it into 2 more internships. One was in a microbiology lab, and I was doing, excuse me, let me grab water. I was able to get a project approved in the microbiology lab as a part of my internship in the Human Identification Lab. And I construed it as a way for me to get experience working in the biological aspect of forensics. So forensics is a big field. Pretty much anything you can think of can fall into forensics in some sense. Because forensics is pretty much just anything pertaining to a legal case. And so it's not just forensic anthropology, it's also forensic biology, it's also forensic chemistry. I think there's even forensic accountants. So there's just a whole lot of things to pursue under that umbrella of forensics. And so working in the microbiology lab gave me the opportunity to do more of the lab work and see if that was what I wanted to do. And it was very stringent in the same sense that forensic anthropology is, in that you have to be very careful with how you're handling specimens and make sure that there's no cross-contamination, and making sure that everything you're doing is written down and recorded somewhere. And so that was my second internship. And then my third internship was working in the isotope lab at Chico State, which was, it's like located really right next to the human identification lab. So it worked out really well. But it was the same deal as the microbiology lab and the human identification lab kind of combined. Because what we did was we worked a lot with bone specimens and decalcifying them so that we could retrieve their DNA and then analyze that DNA to track migration patterns, I believe. And so a lot of these things just require that attention to detail and that focused eye to make sure you're doing the job right. And going forward from there, when I graduated with my degree, I relied on these internships a lot during my interview process to make sure that when employers asked me, why should we hire you in a hospital, I was able to tell them, this isn't exactly hospital work, but a lot of the principles are the same. I've worked on legal cases, so I think I can handle working with patient information, because there's a lot of confidentiality between both of them that you need to make sure you abide by. HIPAA laws are very strict, and so if you're able to demonstrate to your employer that you're competent enough to violate HIPAA laws by stating that you've already worked with confidential information, you already have a big leg up on other people who are applying for that position who don't have that experience. And so also diversity is becoming such a more common keyword that you hear from employers when they're hiring. And so saying that you're an anthropology major who understands diversity and its importance is also a big leg up during the interview process. I think ultimately our goal is to be employed and be able to make sure that we have marketable skills so that when we get into the job market, whether we have our bachelor's, our master's, or our PhD, we're able to successfully apply for those positions. And being able to say that you understand diversity is really important for both you and employers. And then, let's see here. And then being able to say that you've worked with legal cases is also a big leg up. So what I do now is I work as a pathology technician assistant at Kaiser. And pathology, for those of you who don't know, is basically the study of diseases. And in the hospital setting, what a pathologist does is they look at slides and determine whether a patient has cancer or not, what kind of cancer it is, the staging, what kinds of diseases it is. According to Google, it says the science of the causes and effects of diseases, especially the branch of medicine that deals with the laboratory examination of samples of body tissue for diagnostic or forensic purposes. So what that means is that pathologists are the people who your appendixes go out to, any kind of organ or body part that gets removed from you, even simple skin shaves go to a pathologist to make sure that there's no underlying causes, that your primary care physician wasn't able to grossly identify. So I guess the chain, or so to speak, of how things go in a hospital is you're admitted to the hospital, you make your appointment to get surgery done for, let's say, your appendix. Your appendix gets removed during surgery, and then during surgery, they take your appendix and they place it into a buffered 10% formaldehyde solution called formalin, which acts as a preservative. And then they send that over to pathology. And then once it gets to pathology, it gets sectioned, and then either the entire thing or representative sections of that specimen get submitted into tiny little cassettes called blocks. And then those get turned into microscopic slides that the pathologist then looks at to determine what kind of disease it is, or if it is a disease, if it's cancer, et cetera. So there's a few major players in a pathology lab, which are the pathology technicians, basically the minions of the lab who keep it going. Then there's the pathologist assistants, who are basically the pathologist's grossing hand, right? And grossing basically just means sectioning, like dissecting almost. And then you have the pathologists, who are the ones who actually look at the slides. And then there's other people like cytology, who turn fluids into slides. And then there's also the histologists, who are the ones who are turning those blocks into slides. And so as a pathologist assistant, we gross like the smaller things, like things that are entirely submitted and are basically pretty much straightforward cases. And to be a pathologist assistant, all you need is an associate's degree that has adequate science courses. And then kind of the next step above that is the pathologist assistant, which is the person who does the rest of the grossing for larger specimens, placentas, for total organ removals, things like that. And they're the ones who are pretty much the supervisory role in the department. And in order to be a pathologist assistant, there's actually a special master's program. I think there's only one in California right now, and it's in Loma Linda, and then the rest are on the East Coast. But pathologist assistant is a very good job to have. It's very similar to a physician assistant, for those of you who are familiar with that, except rather than being able to work in all departments, you're pretty much specialized in pathology and recognizing diseases and all that, so that when you're actually grossing, you're able to identify which pieces look like abnormal tissue, so you can submit those to the pathologists. And then the pathologists, like I said before, they're the ones who look at the slides. They are the ones who assist in directing where surgery goes to make sure that whatever the surgeon is trying to remove is entirely gone, macroscopically and microscopically. And for all of us, besides like getting the standard workload of, you know, skin shaves and pieces of placentas, whole placentas, organs, stuff like that, we also occasionally have to do autopsies. Now, fortunately, I don't have to do autopsies now because I'm way over them. But working in the Human ID lab was kind of like my first exposure to doing something similar to an autopsy, in that when we get remains there, a lot of the time they're mummified or in some state of decomp. So before we can examine the bones, which is what the forensic anthropologists do, we kind of have to get to the bones. And so there's dermestid beetles for that, but dermestids are kind of picky eaters in that they don't eat just all of the dead tissue. They just eat the bits that they like. And unfortunately, they don't really like skin jerky. So we have to remove all of that by hand with a scalpel. And so that involves a lot of just gross removal of organs or whatever's left of the tissue pretty much. It can be pretty gross. And whatever's left goes to the dermestids, and then from there the anthropologists look at the bones. But in a hospital setting, it's a little bit different in that we don't have dermestid beetles, unfortunately. And our goal isn't to strip down the body to the bones. It's just to prepare the body so that a pathologist or a pathologist assistant can look at it and see if the body matches what the suspected cause of death was in the report. So that means a few different things. It means that occasionally we'll get babies for autopsies. We'll get juveniles, adults, and not all of them are just full autopsies like you see on CSI or Bones or whatever. It's just they're looking for different things. So you're not always going to have to remove the brains or go into the colon. But occasionally you will have to do full autopsies. And so it's just a lot of physical work. And before I was working at Kaiser, I was working at a similar job. It was as a grossing assistant. And we had to do autopsies fairly frequently. I want to say like one a month. And so a lot of that just entailed making sure that we have the right person, that this person is who this paperwork says it is, and that all of our I's are dotted and all of our T's are crossed legally, medically, all of that. And to make sure that we're not doing work that we're not authorized to do. So it's just a lot of attention to detail pretty much. And then once you're in the body, you work under the supervision of a pathologist assistant who works under the supervision of a pathologist. I've done a few autopsies. They're not like you see in CSI and Bones. They're a lot messier, but they're definitely very educational and kind of eye-opening to how the human body works. Once you get on the inside, it's really just like a machine pretty much, and a pathologist is the mechanic. And a pathologist, I forgot to mention this, but a pathologist, they are doctors who went to medical school, and then from medical school, which is 4 years, you go and do your residency for 4 years. And then after residency, you can choose to pursue a fellowship where you specialize even further as a doctor. So you have a few options there, and one of them is as a forensic pathologist, which I don't think very many people do full-time. It's a lot of consult work. The bulk of pathologists make up hospital workers, and then some of them continue into medical examiners. So if someone dies in your area, hopefully it goes to a medical examiner because they're certified doctors. And then there's also coroners who don't necessarily have any kind of medical training, but they're still able to sign off on all of the paperwork and whatnot. And the last I heard, most counties are trying to move away from coroners in favor of medical examiners. But pathology isn't one of the most popular residencies, I think. So they're kind of having a hard time making that shift. So as far as where I am now, I think anthropology definitely plays a big part in that. And my degree prepared me very well for working in a hospital because you see a lot of different people in a hospital. And when I first started working for Kaiser, they showed us this very eye-opening video, I want to say, of basically just people in a hospital, like the people you see on escalators and elevators, walking the halls, and with little captions above them that just said, found out tumor was benign, found out tumor was malignant, this person just lost their mom, this person just found out that they're terminal and having a kid, that sort of thing. And it was a very eye-opening video because you look at people going through those hospitals, and it's completely true. No one's at a hospital just to kill the time and hang out with their friends or whatever. You know, they're there because someone they know is being impacted by a disease or cancer. And so it's very important to stay professional but also to be empathetic and understanding, which is what I felt like I got a lot out of from my anthropology degree, was just understanding people and understanding why they do what they do. And that people aren't, you know, unreasonable because they're unreasonable for no reason at all. They're being impacted by cancer. They're going through, you know, some of the hardest times of their lives right now. And as a hospital worker, you have to be understanding of that, to not just take someone's words and actions at face value, but to look beyond that and say, you know, maybe this person's going through a tough time, and the best thing I can do for them right now is to smile and ask them how they're doing, and to help them out. And a lot of that's, you know, the same with anthropology, is you're here to understand people's cultures, their backgrounds, how they got to where they are, and piecing all that together into, you know, their story. And I think it's the same for healthcare, is like you have to understand people's stories and work with them to find the best course of action for them. And at the very least, you know, enjoy what you're doing enough to smile and have people be able to smile back at you, because you don't know what they're going through, but, you know, you can at least be sure it's not like the best thing ever. So I think anthropology is definitely a really good degree suited for healthcare, provided you get, you know, the science classes to make sure you're understanding what you're doing once you get there. And, you know, again, internships. I can't drive that point hard enough with you guys, is that internships are incredibly important. Whether you're doing your internship in a hospital or in forensics or really anything in the area, just getting that experience will kind of show you where you need to go with your degree and how you want to apply anthropology, because it's such a broad field that you can take it anywhere if you want to. You just got to know what it is that you're wanting to do with it and get that exposure. So once you're, you know, pitching yourself to employers, they know that you're the best applicant for the position because you know what you're getting into.
So Rohit, thank you so much.
No, thank you.